Hello, everyone, and welcome to I'm Curious to T7, where we share stories, tips, and advice so that you can achieve your goals in a fraction of the time. For the next 6 episodes, we will be covering everything financial education related. I'm your host T7, and today we have a very special guest with us. So, if you'd like to introduce yourself to listeners and simply let them know a little bit about you.
Of course. So, my name is Cherry. I'm a wealth coach for 9 to 5 employees. And the reason why I specifically want to help 9 to 5 employees is because I personally went through a period of time when I was solely depending on my 9 to 5 job. But that also happened to be a job that made me extremely depressed and stressed. And it made me constantly live in fear because I'm basically forced to do something that I don't want to do, but I have to continue doing it because it pays my bills. And so after going through that really dark period of my life, I even decided to live in my car. We can, elaborate on that story. But after going through that, I realized how important it is for 9 to 5 employees to have more than one income stream so that they don't have to depend solely on their day job and they don't have to bend over backwards for their boss or, do unreasonable hours just to keep their job. And that's what I'm here talking about, building different income streams and helping 9 to 5 employees achieve financial independence and financial freedom.
I think that's absolutely amazing. I think it's also just so important as you shared. It's just about being able to have that choice as to whether you actually want to have as much of a productive day to day. Because like
Yeah.
when you have that 9 to 5, it's
Mhm.
constantly there's nothing that you can do to change it, and you pretty
Right.
much have to do this on a regular basis, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So I
Mhm.
definitely think that what you do is definitely important. And why don't you share with the listeners a bit more into your story?
Yeah, of course. So, my background is in finance and accounting, and my first job out of college is as a Big Four auditor. And for those of you who might be familiar with Big Four accounting, it's a very toxic and stressful environment. And that being my first job out of college, that just, really put me in shock because in college I was always brainwashed, Big Four is the way to go and everything Big Four. So, rainbows and butterflies and glamours. But when I start my first year, it was so different from my internship. And I just felt like constantly overworked. I was traveling all the time. I have to drive from LA to Santa Ana, which would be like at least 1 hour or an hour and a half, depending on traffic each way. And sometimes I would work like towards midnight and I still have to drive home. And then the next morning, I have to drive back. And I just remember like it was a very stressful year. And I also got into a lot of car accidents because like when you're sleep deprived and tired, your driving skills get impaired. And so that's like a little background of my story. And after like being through that, I just went into a very like low self-esteem state because I finally decided to quit my job. But my whole life, my identity was always tied with, hey, these are my grades, or this is the school I went to, or this is the internship or the company that I'm working for. And I'm a Big Four auditor. That was my identity for a really long time. And when I decided to quit my first job, I just felt so lost and I felt like I was worthless. Like I didn't know who I was. Like, who is Cherry if she's not a Big Four auditor? And so after that, I also fell into like the trap of really like self-pity and feeling bad about myself and low self-esteem. That coupled with like the strong desire to want to buy a house for myself because I really wanted to have that sense of belonging. I'm not from LA. I came to LA for school, but then I just did not feel that strong sense of belonging. I've always been renting and living in dorms. And so that coupled with that strong goal of wanting to buy a house and the very high housing prices here in West LA, I decided to live in my car. And that was definitely one of the like I want to say darkest times of my life, living in my car as like a young Asian female in West LA is definitely quite unsafe. And I've also had times when I just felt like I couldn't sleep because I don't know whether or not someone's going to come attack me or like do something to my car or to me. And I was just constantly like sleeping in fear. But at the same time, because I was sleeping in my car, because there was like so little things for me to do inside my car, like it's just a car, I can't fit that much in. It really it really forced me to minimize my life and really forced me to focus on self-reflection because there's really nothing else to do. it's hard for me to even sit up, like, because I put the back seats down. And so that adds like a height to, the bottom of my car, like to the seating area of my car. And so it's hard for me to even sit up straight. And yeah, I just remember that period of time, I was just thinking to myself, like, who am I without that Big Four job? So, granted, at that time, I was like commuting to my new job, and that from my old place is also really far. So that's like another reason why I decided to live in my car. But yeah, during that reflection time, I was just thinking about myself. Okay, I have this new job, but I don't want this to be my entire identity. I don't want to just be, a working professional, working in finance. Like, I don't want that. I want to be able to create a new identity that's going to be there regardless of whether or not I have this job or not, whether or not I want to work this 9 to 5 or not. And I had two keywords that stood out to me, and that is to create and connect. At that time, I didn't know what it meant, but now it's starting to become more clear what that really meant.
I think that's definitely just so amazing having shared that, especially because like when people often see like how much people have achieved, they don't often see the hard work, the sacrifices that then go on in the back end. And I think it's definitely just really important, especially like just on social media, like people are constantly showing this front, but then they're not actually showing how much hard work, dedication, time, effort has then been put towards that. So I definitely think that's an amazing share. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And sort of like, what advice would you
Mhm.
give to those who may be looking to get into finances and
Mm,
kind of don't know how or even where to start?
mhm. Yeah. So, first of all, the number one thing that I tell anyone to do is to have an emergency fund. And a lot of people think of having emergency fund as like, oh, I'm young, nothing's bad's gonna happen. But like, you don't know. And the point of having an emergency fund is just so that you don't have to dip into, credit card debt. You don't have to take out loans that are high interest. It's just to prevent like you from lending out like expensive money, basically. And so that's why it's so important to have an emergency fund no matter what. Like, even if you're in debt right now, like, have an emergency fund so you don't have to take out more debt. That's my number one key rule. And the number two is to try to get rid of those high interest loans as soon as you can. For a lot of people, that might be your credit card loans, right? Like your credit card debt, that's usually high interest over 20%. And that is just like money leaking out of your pockets. And of course, there is also sometimes people have car loans, and car loans can be quite expensive too, much more expensive than like mortgage loans, especially with like the low mortgage interest rate right now. And so having these high interest loans and debt, that's just basically like having holes in your pocket, and your money just like leaks out. No matter how much you make, you still have to pay off your interest, you still have to pay off your loans, you're still owing people money, and the longer you wait, the more money you owe. And so that is like the second thing that I would want people to, start to look at. And the third thing that people should start to look at or look into is definitely investing. And a lot of people have like a set of common misconceptions about investing. People think investing is really risky, really scary. You have to be extremely smart to do it, and you have to do stock picking. And I want to say that like none of that is true. You don't have to do stock picking. It is not necessarily like any more risky than like your day-to-day life. And just looking at historical performance, you're able to see a lot of what has been going on in the past like 30, 50 years in the stock market. Like, this is a really good indicator of what is going to go on in the future. And like, even in the past, we've went through recessions, we've went through depressions, we've went through like many major events in the country, but then at the same time, the stock market always recovers. So there's also like the sense of security, just knowing historical performance. It does not necessarily indicate, future performance, but it's a good indicator to, give you a peace of mind knowing that your money is more likely than not to be safe in the stock market when you invest in something that is more diverse. And talking about diversification, that's why I don't really necessarily think investing has to be stock picking, because a lot of people, if they don't have much knowledge about analyzing a company or the financial statement and understanding like the industry, it's very difficult for them to stock pick. And so I always recommend beginner investors and even seasoned investors who are just like, kind of lazy, to invest in low cost index funds. And that is also what I personally do. I also invest in low cost index funds, mainly in the portfolios that I cannot like risk losing money on, aka my retirement accounts, because I want to make sure that, Grandma Cherry is not going to resent young Cherry and be like, why the frick did you gamble with my retirement money? Right. And so that is why I decided to only do stock picking on the accounts that I can lose. Not saying that I want to lose that money, but I would not risk my retirement money with like stock picking. And all my retirement money, most of them, they're in low cost index funds. And that is where I would like suggest people to start looking into, does your company offer any retirement plan? Usually for a lot of companies it's called 401k, so definitely ask your HR people team about what that is about. And of course, if you don't work for a company right now, you can also do the Roth IRA, which is also a very popular choice. Definitely look up to see if this is something that you want to do. With Roth IRA, there's that added benefit. There's that 5-year rule. So after 5 years, if you want to take money out, you can take money out, and you don't have to, necessarily worry about penalties because of the 5-year rule, and you're able to take out whatever money you put in. So let's say within the span of 5 years, you put in like 20K. You can take out that 20K. You don't have to necessarily wait till like you're like old and you have to, take money out then.
Definitely, that's absolutely amazing. I really do urge that you listeners were taking notes. If not, feel free to rewind. And sort of like when it comes to investing, what is the number one sort of like skill, characteristic trait that you would say is most important?
Mm, I think there are several characteristics are quite important, but I think the number one is not to get distracted. Especially like this day and age with like social media, everyone's, trying to get your attention, and everyone's, screaming on the top of their lungs that what they're investing in is the best, and whether their like investment strategy is the best. And it's very easy to get sidetracked. I know a lot of people who went into stock market with the mindset of I want to invest, and then they get sidetracked, and then they do like options, day trading, swing trading, instead of like actually investing. And there is some like huge difference between investing and trading. Investing is really looking at the fundamentals of the company, and to me that is like, because I have a finance background, that to me makes sense, right? You look at the fundamentals of the company, you buying a share is buying a piece of the company, like a small piece of the company. And so this makes logical sense. But then a lot of day traders, they look at like trading volumes, they look at like the buy and sell volume, they look at the candles, they look at the support lines, and to me that does not necessarily make sense. And not only does it not make sense, there's that element of gamble in it. In addition to that, it is also very well, first of all, very volatile. Actually takes you way more time to trade than to invest. And at the same time, you also have to pay more taxes, because anything you do within a year, that is short-term capital gains if you were to earn money. And so that is also, kind of detrimental to how much money you can really like, take home with you, and, forever put in your pocket, because you have to pay taxes on your gains, and more taxes because it's short term. And so that is why I personally think it's really important to just stay on track, don't get sidetracked, don't get distracted. A lot of things can look very alluring. You look at, day traders, and sometimes, they make 10,000 or even like, 50, $60,000. What they're not showing is what they're losing, right? So
Mm,
it's really important to really look at someone who, is more transparent about all their gains and losses, and
yeah.
really transparent about their strategy. And their strategy has to make sense to you. If it doesn't, don't follow this person's stock picks, don't follow this person's strategy.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So this is about like simply taking that calculated risk and actually having the information, things so that you know that yes, you may lose some, but then you're also going to gain a lot more than you lose. And then
Mhm.
it's simply just taking that calculated risk really. And sort
Mhm.
of like how would you say that people can stay ahead, especially with like ever
Mm.
changing markets,
Mhm.
crises, etc.
Yeah. The number one thing that people should start doing is to look into what are some ways I can make money. A very common thing in the personal finance world, especially with Dave Ramsey followers. If you are, sorry that I'm bashing on you, but I really do think there's too much emphasis on saving. But when you think about it, like logically speaking, there is a definite max to how much you can save. If you're making $30,000 a year living in West LA, there's a very low chance that you can afford a house in the near future. And that's just like doing the math. Sure, you can talk to me about compound interest, right? But you also have to consider the fact that you have to eat, you have to live, you have to like afford medical bills, you have to afford insurance. And at the same time, housing prices will also raise, right? It's not like housing prices will just be there forever waiting for you. And so when it comes to that, when you're currently not making a lot of money, you're not currently making six figures or, you know, mid six figures if you're living in a high cost of living city, but you have bigger financial goals, then you have to think about how can I increase my income? And when you think about how can I increase my income, it's not just increasing the income at my job, because a lot of people, their immediate gut reaction is, oh, I should beg my boss for a raise, or I should, work more hours, put in more hours so I can earn more. But again, your time is limited, and even so, how much you can get paid at your job is also quite limited. Like usually there's some industry range and standard, and with your like X amount of years of experience, it's hard for you to get paid more than, you know, that range. And so start to think about like, what are some different income streams that I can have? A lot of my clients, I run a coaching business. A lot of my clients have 9 to 5 jobs, but they also have side hustles that are really irrelevant to their 9 to 5 jobs. For example, one of my clients, she runs a podcast too. Her YouTube, she doesn't have a YouTube channel. She runs a podcast, and she also has a coaching business that is about budgeting, and also has a full-time job that has nothing to do with any of that. And so it's very important for you to keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to follow your 9 to 5 in order to have your side hustles. Your side hustles can be completely irrelevant. It can be something that you're deeply interested in. And honestly, like almost anything in this world can be turned into money, can be monetized. You've seen, you know, kids opening toys, unboxing toys on YouTube and making like so much money, like millions of dollars from just unboxing toys. And so never limit yourself, and always know that there are other options for you to increase your income streams, but you have to think outside the box, and you have to be open-minded, and of course you have to put in the work.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that's important, just having them multiple income streams, because then you're not relying on that one paycheck. You then have it coming in from multiple different areas.
Mm-hmm.
So then if one goes, you just simply find something else to do, then add another one, and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. And then
Yeah.
when it comes to times like this, you're no longer thinking, oh my gosh, I've lost that job, because you have all these other side hustles
Yeah.
as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's definitely just important, especially like getting investing, trading, just different sort of things like that is definitely just important and starting from as young as possible. And could you share with the listeners where they can then find you if they'd like to find out about any upcoming things that you may have?
Yeah, of course. So I'm most active on Instagram. I'm on there almost daily. My handle is cherrytung.co. So Tung is Tung. That's my last name. Cherry is my first name, and then .co. That's also my website if you want to visit my website. And I also have a YouTube channel, and that is just my first and last name, Cherry, and then Tung, my last name, Cherry Tung. That is where I'm most active. I am also on Facebook. So if you want to visit my Facebook group, it's also linked in the bio of my IG, and this is where you can find me.
It's been great having you on the show, and also for you listeners, all the links to all that will be in the description below. Be sure to go and check it out, and thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. That's it from me. Bye.
Bye.